No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Gillian Gotzel, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us.
Well, hello and welcome to EOS Dublin's podcast called Ignition with me, Gillian Gotzel. Now, today I have a very interesting man by the name of Paul Scott, who is the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Disruptive PR and who is based in Johannesburg. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Gillian, and thank you for having me.
No, it's brilliant. Now, we met in Malta recently and we kind of knew each other vaguely. And confession, I didn't realize I knew you until I met you and you pointed out that I knew you. That was very embarrassing. But I'm hoping to make amends by talking about your wonderful career and what you can do and your amazing talents in this podcast.
Not to worry, I'm generally quite a forgiving soul. So
good.
You should be okay.
Good. So going back, Paul, you have quite a strong career, a previous career in banking and finance. How does that compare now to you working in the world of crypto?
Well, it's quite an interesting segue almost. I spent the better part of 20 years in hardcore investment banking, only to find out that you kind of realize that the banking world has some fundamental flaws that the bankers are not incentivized to change in any way, shape, or form. So there's this situation where this completely centralized model is there to basically make the bankers as rich as possible and to take as much from individual clients' pockets. It's not really a sustainable model going forward, especially with the way millennials are entering the market and their completely different kind of view on the world, to the extent that they have a kind of a really interesting view on how life should unfold. And I just think that if we're unwilling to adapt to the younger generations coming through, we're going to miss out quite substantially. So crypto was, well, perhaps not crypto as much as blockchain technology was a natural progression for me, to the extent that, take the power out of the hands of the centralized power and, sort of enable the decentralized world to kind of, operate things almost in a libertarian type fashion.
It's very refreshing to speak actually with an ex-banker who has those rather enlightened views. So that's a cool thing.
Thank you.
And I'm obviously in the space. I totally agree with you. It is horrendous, that old banking tradition, just because it's always been done like that. And, the centralization of power, authority, and money is pretty horrible. Now, since you've moved into the crypto world, it is a different way of looking at things. And you're right, the young people are educating us, slightly more mature people. Is there anything that you dislike about the crypto world or the blockchain world?
Yeah, I think really for me, it's the kind of almost access to easy money. I came from a world where there was a deep level of inspection before every single penny was spent. In fact, I worked for a very strong chief executive officer in one of the banks that I worked for in South Africa, who was notorious for turning the penny over too many times, as we would say, in the fact that he was almost risk averse. And the crypto world has seen an advent of kind of the diametric opposite to that, to use that kind of term, where anybody would just throw any kind of amount of money at a cool idea. One line of code would attract $30 million worth of investment, and then 6 months later go belly up, and what happened to the $30 million kind of thing. So I think the kind of lack of inspection and almost the frivolity with which people's money had been treated by certain unscrupulous individuals is a negative for me. But I think a lot of that is being flushed out now. The crowd has kind of left the space, waiting perhaps, who knows, for something new and improved to come along, where trust can be regained, and the whole modus operandi and genesis of blockchain tech, which is a decentralized, trustless environment where you're able to track transactions down to their kind of minute detail, is something that that is going to be solved ultimately, I think. But I would say that that kind of heartless abuse of people's good nature almost was a bit of a downer. But I think it's largely gone now, hopefully.
I think, yes, as we reach the end, the crypto winter did some good things, more than in nature than in crypto. So what's your opinion then? I mean, we see ICOs have a bit of a turbulent past. I mean, obviously it democratizes that opportunity to invest, and then it was abused by certain ones. Do you think, like there's ICOs, STOs, IEOs, do you think there's any front runner in terms of a crowdfunding mechanism?
Well, I think an IEO is quite an interesting mechanism in that I think it's going to have a relatively short lifespan, and it's leveraging on the fact that exchanges have this kind of access to funding that a lot of ICOs in the kind of ICO 1.0 world had by virtue of, have a good idea, raise a couple of bucks to spend money on some marketing and a little bit of dev work. I think IEOs are filling that gap now because the cost of those kind of ventures has gone up so exponentially, because I think people realize now that, as with any startup, you're going to need to have sort of 5 to 7% of your ultimate fundraising goal available to spend on marketing to get the word out, because it's such a crowded market. So I think that ICOs and STOs for me probably would be more prevalent in future than IEOs. And of the two, I think STOs are probably the leader for me, specifically because there is a component of investor return that is embedded in an STO that's not prevalent in a pure utility ICO kind of token.
Yes.
That said, I think the ICOs that come to market with very strong product development backgrounds, so software as a service companies that are pivoting into blockchain technology and launching an ICO to kind of raise funding to enable that pivot. I think a combination of those kinds of transactions and good, strong STOs with a proper return mechanism behind them are going to be sort of the winners, I guess, in the next couple of years for me in the market.
You help companies, on your LinkedIn it says you help companies raise funds. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it's not as simple as it sounds. Let's put it that way. We get approached by a lot of people to say, "Help us raise money," and then when we say yes, but the cost of that is X, then they're like, "Oh, but that's cool, but we pay a success fee." So I think a lot of the older, and when I mean in a market that's only 4 or 5 years old, to use the term older, but I think a lot of the earlier adopters in the crypto space were used to the fact that a good idea and a couple of roadshows, and you could raise $20 million and close your eyes, and it was easy as that. There's still a little bit of that in the market. But what we look to do is to tell a good, strong, solid story, and we always start with what we call the why, which is why does your organization exist, and why would the world be a worse off place if what you're doing didn't happen? And then we move into the what and the how of what you're trying to achieve. Whereas I think in the past, a lot of companies focused on the what. This is my product. This is how I'm going to get it done. They weren't focused on why should you exist and what kind of problems are you solving. So they were very product oriented, not solution oriented. So our view is always to focus on that solution orientation to help clients raise funds sort of from our investor database.
Perfect. That's so cool. The why is very powerful. Yes, I've been in conferences with Disruptive when the why is being discussed, and it's very compelling. And you keep on going back. Well, but why? But why? It's like,
exactly.
It's a nice product, and it's why?
Yeah, and you people kind of mix up that confluence. They don't really. That they can't sometimes, without some really detailed, deep digging, escape the what, because they'll say, "Well, we exist because of this." So that's a what. No, it's not. It's a why. We say, no, well, it's not really a why. This is an example of a why. So we always quote Uber's why, and I'll paraphrase because I don't know it off the top of my head as well as my co-founder Clara does. But it's we exist to move people. Like that's a real compelling why. Yeah. Mobility is a massive why statement. So a lot of our clients dive into the what, and they can't really get their minds around how the two are divorced from each other until we go through our kind of stages and phasing to get that, to get their minds around it.
What are your favorite projects you're working on at the moment then that you can speak of?
Yeah, I think the one that I always like to reference is a project called Mirrors, which is a sort of sustainability project. The company is a very well established property management and property development company in Norway, but they're doing a pivot into blockchain. They're building a platform. They're building a methodology that basically focuses on sustainability within the construction industry and then within the broader environment around them. So they're raising 150 million euros across 3 different fundraising mechanisms, a mixture of debt, equity, and an STO. And they've engaged us to help them get the message out. And I think one of the key successes we've had so far is to help them understand that a pivot into a consumer brand strategy is going to be so powerful for them in terms of what they're trying to do. And their first project is actually the first kind of eco-friendly hotel in the Arctic Circle. So it'll be based on the edge of a glacier in Norway. It's quite the most amazing looking building, and all planning permission will be done by September. And we're hoping to be invited to the launch party when it's opened, because it's quite a spectacular building. Of course, closest friends, naturally.
That sounds fascinating. Now, we're on the EOS podcast. So do you have any views about EOS? Any observations?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with a client called Valentix, who's actually doing an EOS dev, and they've worked very closely with the guys at Block One to build their platform on the EOS chain. And I think some of the lessons that I've learned from them certainly are that in terms of things such as scalability, speed of transaction fulfillment, faster app development for developers, greater security and less friction for users. I mean, these are all quite compelling visions. And I think that, in the platform space where you think of the likes of Ethereum and EOS and others, I think these are, what the guys are doing are really some really interesting things to create that vision of a, completely transparent, frictionless future environment. And, it's one that I'm keeping a close eye on. I mean, obviously the team did exceptionally well in their fundraising cycles to raise the amount of money that they had. I think the market is going to be watching them very closely to make sure that A, the money is spent wisely, and B, the breadth of the vision that they have is kind of achieved. And all power to them. It'll be quite a cool thing to witness come to life.
And as I'm the host of this podcast, I get to interview a lot of people in this space, and I have to say, the crypto winter, though disconcerting for people, a little bit, because it was a bit sort of worrying. There's a huge amount of building going on, which is very interesting. So yes. My final question to you then, Paul, would be, what do you see for the future? Maybe for the next year, next couple of years? Can you future cast for me?
Yeah, I think we're entering that very interesting space where crypto in general and a couple of the larger kind of grandmothers and fathers and mothers of the space, such as, Bitcoin and Ethereum and EOS and others, have reached that stage where they're too big to fail almost. Mm-hmm. That it's going to almost be irresponsible of traditional asset managers to ignore the asset class as a whole. So while I don't see masses of money or masses of backing coming into just any kind of projects, I think those real, next generation future proofing kinds of projects that exist today and will come into existence in the near future are going to attract that kind of asset management money. And I think the view shared by a number of different people across the space, which is it only takes sort of 1% of the trillions and trillions of dollars of assets under management to come into crypto to see the market go up in totality by 100-fold. And I think we're getting to that kind of compelling space where, like I say, zero for any of these tokens is no longer really an option. There will always be an adoption market for crypto as an asset class in general. And I think that, if I cast my old school banker's eye on these things, it's almost that there is a compelling kind of story that now needs to enter the kind of mainstream media almost. And for me, I think that's the kind of 18-month to 2-year view.
I think you're right. And it's starting to percolate through. It is very interesting. So if people want to find you, Paul, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn most predominantly. I'm a little bit too busy, regrettably, to be as Twitter mad as I would like to be. But my LinkedIn profile can be found Paul Scott 55. I'm on Telegram at Paul Scott 5, and obviously on email paul@disruptive.com and on disruptive.uk as our website.
And why the 55 or why the 5? Is it a lucky number or is it a birthday?
Well, it is a lucky number. When I played junior football under 8s in a city called Durban, which is on the east coast of South Africa, the first jersey I was given, because I was a short little podgy fella, the first jersey I was given was number 5 and told, you will be a centre back and you will never be anything other than a centre back. And regrettably, the coach was right, but I didn't play to a terrible level.
Yeah.
But the first jersey I was given was the number 5 jersey. And then the first game of rugby I ever played, I was given the number 5 jersey. So it just seemed,
it's appropriate. Yeah, that's really cool.
And I thought I'd just keep the 5s and be done with it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, I was curious. A nice answer. I didn't expect that. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time today, Paul.
You're most welcome.
And very interesting, as always. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Gillian. I appreciate the opportunity.